So I am Kyle Wilson. I live in Orlando, Florida, and I'm a director of coaching. So I started, probably when I was 3 years old with my dad in the backyard, and my love for the game just kind of progressed. And it's pretty funny because people always ask me this question: do I watch baseball, basketball, football? And I don't. I'm probably the most un-American American because all I do is soccer and futsal. I don't do anything else. I don't watch anything else. I don't even watch the Super Bowl. I don't have interest. So I've always been around and in love with the game, and it's, offered me an opportunity to now work back into it. And I had, different opportunities as a youth player and as an adult to do various things that I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute anyways. But I feel like I'm very fortunate to have the path that I've had in this game.
Right on, right on. And what age did you start? And then was there anyone that sort of took you into it?
I was really fortunate because I had coaches that weren't American, that didn't teach, the American kickball method, which I'm sure I see all the time across the country. I was able to learn about football. I didn't learn soccer, I learned football. And that's one of the things that I've been able to transpire back to the kids that I work with now is I'm trying to teach them football, how to play and develop in the process of becoming a football player, not a soccer player. And it's the methodology is completely different. The first things that we learned were, for example, ball mastery in all elements, not just dribbling. It's passing, receiving, juggling, shooting, first touch, all those elements that you need to have skill-wise to reach the highest level of the game. And these are the type of people that shape me to understand what football actually is, not what we call soccer here. So it's, first learning the technical skills needed to play. It's then the soccer IQ to understand. It was never, ever about physical. It wasn't about being an athlete. It wasn't about, being the biggest, the fastest, or the strongest. It was about having the technical skills and the mental ability to outthink an opponent. And so one phrase I'll give you is speed of thought can compensate for lack of technique. So even if you're a lower level skilled player, but you can think faster here, it doesn't matter how big, strong, or fast you are, you can outplay somebody. And the premise is the same, whether how big you are. And I'm not a big guy. I mean, I'm 5'9", 5'10". So that tells you right there that I had to outthink players. I had to technically be better and outthink the opponent to try and win and be successful. What it takes to actually play at the highest level. And that's something, in my opinion, that we're missing in this country is everybody's so focused on just winning and picking up that youth trophy versus teaching players what it actually takes. So, if, you had a son and you said, my kid wants to be a pro. Okay, you need to understand first, it's a 10-year process. Second, there's so many elements technically and tactically you need to understand and be proficient in if you're going to actually reach that outside of a physical base or a cognitive base. Mentally, can you hang, right? If you don't have those core competencies, so to speak, you're not making it.
Talking about coaching, so why coach? What got you into it?
You want the short answer or the long answer?
Whichever you'd like.
Look, the reason why I got into coaching is because of, in my opinion, how poor the American environment is in terms of player development, right? So we have all these programs, we have all these levels of competition and things like that. And I know a lot of different people in this game, in this country, and we all speak about the same thing. There's a lack of player development and progression. I feel like in this country, it's too focused on the athlete versus the player, right? Okay, so you need to have size, speed, and strength to be successful. Well, in reality, you watch some of the best players in the world, they're not super strong. They're not overly tall. They're not extremely fast, right? And these are the best players in the world. So there's obviously a design flaw in our system of wanting to have athletes over players. Now, if you're an athlete and you're a player at the same time, then you have a perfect combination, of course. But you don't need to be an athlete. So that starts by teaching players the correct way to play. So, for example, the fundamentals. I am so big on the technical fundamentals to start with that in my sessions, it's all technique based and it's all 1v1, 2v1s, 2v2s. I don't ever touch 7v7 or the actual game for players until they're about a week out from a game. So our mission statement is, listen, we want to develop players for the top 5 leagues in the world or European Pro Academy players or South American. And we've had success. We have one player that's at a big club in Europe. We have a second one that's going to a big club in England. We have a player now that played, that is in South America. And it's because we're trying to take care of those fundamentals first, teach them the core elements that you need to play, and you will breed success.
As a coach, what are you looking for in young talent when they first come in? What do they have to have, in your opinion, for for you to take them onto your teams?
So, I mean, it really varies by age, but to give you like a general overview, what I would say is the first thing is commitment and work ethic. If you are not committed to practice, because we offer 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, if you're not committed to coming to practice and this also goes on the parent, because you have to be dedicated as a parent. So like, if your child says, hey, I want to be a pro, you have to be committed to taking them, because for 8 years, you're the transportation. They can't drive yet. They can't get themselves there unless they're local enough, right? But otherwise, you as a player and a parent both have to be committed. On the second side is you have to have work ethic. People have asked me before, how do you get a player to that level? And what I try and relate is, it's not so much what I've done. So with the kid that I have at that club that I played in the Champions League, I went out, I created the exercises, I created the sessions. The kid put in the work. In 3 years, I maybe had to talk to him 2 times about needing to work harder. And that's 2 to 4 sessions a week of him working with us, that he's training, and that we have to talk to him twice in 3 years. So that just should hopefully highlight the amount of work ethic that you need to have if you want to reach that level. And that's what we're trying to teach is, if you're going to make it, you got to be committed and you got to be ready to work. Now, if you're talking about from a soccer specific standpoint, the first thing I look for is technique, right? I make every player that comes to me first juggle, because if you, in my opinion, you can't juggle well, you're going to struggle on a technical base, because that's the first thing. If you can juggle, that will indicate to me that you have a higher technical skill set, because juggling is very difficult to achieve. And in my eyes, there's 2 types of juggling. There's freestyle, where you use more of the toe. The way that I look for is with the shoelaces, where you're now popping the ball up a little bit higher, which requires you to have a higher technical skill set to achieve. And of course, if you're using the toe, that's for freestyle, where you're doing like all those tricks and flicks and things like that. We don't use juggling for tricks and flicks. We're using it for ball control, for playing it up in the air and controlling it on the floor, to keep it alive, to use the inside, to use the shoelaces, to use the outside, the thigh, the chest, the head, right? If you can do those things, that's telling us that you have a higher technical skill set. If you don't have that and you're with our younger ages, okay, we can develop those things, and that's part of our program.
What kinds of habits or even lifestyle changes have you had so you can prep yourself to play at that higher level?
Man, I use this word all the time. It's sacrifice. When I was a kid, I never, especially when I was younger, I was so focused on soccer. I would train every single day, whether that was in the team environment or at home. Come home, there was a wall I used to have close, and I would always go hit the wall, or I'd take my brother out and we play in the street a lot. And those are things that you have to do and be willing to do if you want to make it. And there's a lot of players today that just go to team practice, right? That don't go outside and don't play in the street. I mean, we were having this conversation earlier, and it's like, if you want to be a player at the highest level, if you're not training, let's say every single day, you're gonna struggle, because you won't have that work ethic, you won't have that drive, you won't have that sacrifice to say, you know what, I'm actually gonna try and make this. Whether you do or not is a different story, but you have to have that drive and that sacrifice to want to make it. And I just kept trying to push myself to do more. I used to, and this is something that people need to understand. You have to have the correct diet, and you need to obviously stay hydrated, but also watch. You need to be watching games. Like, I would on average watch 5 games a week. I was that passionate about it. I wanted to invest and study, learn, and watch the best players. Like, my favorite player ever is Paul Scholes.
If you could go back to your young self, is there anything you would do differently, and what would that be?
I would say 2 things. The first one is I would have a better nutrition, or I'd try to understand more. I unfortunately never had a great level of nutrition until I started getting to probably 17, 18, because I didn't know. My parents didn't know. They weren't athletes, so they didn't know what was necessary from that side to make it, right? I mean, you really have to dedicate. You have to, for example, cut soda. Like, I didn't cut soda. I didn't know soda was bad for you. Never knew. I used to eat, chips a lot, things that were junk food related, right? And those are things that, if you want to be a pro, you can't be going to the dollar menu. You can't be going to grab a bag of Doritos, right? It should be, for example, get carrots and peanut butter or celery or something like that, right? You have to change the way you eat. The second thing is, I would probably even more invest more time into training, right? I mean, in this country alone, I feel like there's a big difference in terms of the training environment. And that can be because your training level at practice isn't high enough. The group's not high enough, but if you compare it to a European level, the environment's not the same. So you have to find ways to make that up. And that's a lot of that's going to come from internally, you pushing yourself more. So I probably would have tried to push myself more, to give more, to do it, because I was always a shy kid. I'm not just shy now, but it's pushing yourself outside of where you're comfortable. And that's where you're going to, make it, if that's what you want to do.
How could game footage help improve players?
Almost priceless, because you can sit there, you can stop the film, and you can say, okay, John, you're here in this position, but did you see, Jake to your left or Alex to your right? And those little details, I think, really help players, because, we encourage kids to go watch games. But one of the things that I think players miss out on is watching themselves, seeing, their body position, where they are on a field compared to their teammates, compared to the opposition. Those are things that, while you can watch pro players do, you'll really learn it by watching yourself, right? Those type of things that actually help players and hopefully get them to understand more in that developmental process that these are things they need to be incorporating. And we've actually seen success with it, because our teams now, after doing those type of things, have shown improvement. Part of the problem, though, is a lot of these things are very cost prohibitive, or can be. So they require a lot of money to pay, and soccer already is very expensive. So we would like to have a system that we could implement across the club, but you have to be able to, it has to be feasible for the program.
One of the reasons why we want to make it more affordable is so that we can get it scattered throughout the clubs and the teams, and it could also be used as a sentimental thing for those young ones, right?
Yeah, sure.
And the parents, yeah. What about from a coach's perspective? In your opinion, why record games?
We record games. I even record training, actually, because that way we can go back and watch and say, for example, I read a quote from the former technical director of the Croatian Football Federation, and he says the eye can only catch about 30% in a game or a session. So when we're filming these sessions of these games, we try and look back and see if there's something that we missed, a detail that we missed, a player using the incorrect foot in a technical activity. So if we're doing like a passing activity and they're using the right foot to pass instead of the left foot, right? Those type of things, those details. In games, it's looking for positions on the field. Where are players in relation to defenders, teammates, and space? Where should they be on the field in relation to those things? Are they in the correct positions? Those little details that matter the most when you're talking about team performance need to be correct. And then you can talk about those individual aspects of using the proper foot in a game, the body position of a player. Are they scanning, or are they just ball watching? Right? Those little details that you need to look for, that you can then relay back to the players and say, okay, well, for 3 minutes, we just watch you staring the ball, right? You're not scanning the area around you. And of course, the best players in the world are constantly scanning, checking their shoulders for information. So those are the things that players need to have to reach that level.
Do you think young athletes can use social media for better exposure in this era?
Being able to share content, I've sent stuff to some of my friends, like that one player that I have in Europe, with a second one coming soon. I would send my friends their Instagram posts, be like, hey, here's them playing in a game, here's them training, and then you can see a little bit of their level. And then they'll be like, okay, I kind of like this, send me full game stuff, or send me, 30 minutes of them playing in an actual game. And it can be a little key to get you through the door, because maybe somebody reposts it, somebody sees it. Again, it's about networking. Who can you get your footage in front of?
So I'm done with my questions. I want to give you the mic and have you talk about anything that you want to mention. So is there anything you want to talk about?
My goal, right? My overall mission for what I do is I want to change the way American soccer, and I'll use the word soccer at this moment, to change to play football. That's my goal. I want to change the way, for example, grassroots is done, in terms of the methodology, in terms of the player progression, in terms of the training environment. I feel like that is my overall goal. And with the program that I've developed, which I call Prospects, I feel like is a starting foundational point to that. So we're putting together training programs, methodology creation, content creation, to try and put those pieces together to offer that in a grander or a complete scale. And the background that I have, as a youth player that went through this system with coaches that taught me the game differently, right? That gave me the opportunity to actually learn football, I'm able to implement back into the environment. And, being a player that went to Palmeiras as a 13-year-old, I went to Olympic Lyonnais as a 14-year-old. I got opportunities as a child that most players won't get. And, the experiences that I have of wanting to become a professional, wanting to, put in that work ethic, I want to be able to give players an opportunity to replicate that on their scale. And the only way, as I mentioned before, to do that is to start with the technical foundation, to start with the 1v1 games, the 2v1 games, the 2v2s, the small-sided stuff that our players in this country are not getting. Training teams and players 5 days a week, these are the things that they need to be doing. These are the things that are hurting them. These are the benefits that they need to have, right? So I'll give you an example. I am not a fan of our current model of youth play, 7v7, 9v9, 11v11. I think it is a very big problem for our country's players, because most of the time players that go into 7v7, they're 8 years old. They still don't know how to share the ball. So why on earth are we putting 8-year-olds into 7v7, right? The second problem that I have with that is players that are into that system, into an environment like that, they're being taught to be stuck as a defender or an attacker. I mean, you gave an example. You were always a forward, which meant that you did most of the attacking side. You didn't learn how to defend, right? It's about learning both sides of the game. So I recommend smaller sided, 4v4, 5v5, because you're trying to develop future pro players. We're not talking about trying to develop, a recreational or competitive program. The goal of U.S. Soccer says is to develop pro players. So then we need to do the right thing in this moment for youth players. Put them into smaller scenarios. Let them play both sides of the game. And by playing small-sided, you have to play offense and defense, as an example. And those are elements that I feel like are missing from players. So if those are things that people want to discuss, I'm here. I'm more than happy to talk to anybody that's interested, and start to put change down for American soccer to become football. The second side is the program that I offer is called Prospects, and it's all about trying to develop high-level players. So if that's something that you're interested in, want to learn more about or connect with me on, I'll be more than happy to share that content with you, to try and grow, because, again, my goal is to change American soccer into football.